part of it, as far as I'm concerned, you know. 'Cause
Sure.
Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, Buffalo, New York. It is the 26th of October, 2006, approximately 1 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
George L. Eberle, date of birth October 27th, 1939, Buffalo, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I was 8 years at grammar school, 4 years I attended Bishop Fallon High School. Then I worked for almost 5 years before I entered the service.
Okay, I was Bishop Timon.
Oh, you were Timon? Oh. You South Buffalo boy?
Yes.
Oh, so am I. That's where I live now.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why?
Well, at the time, it was, you know, the draft was on, and I was 1A in the draft, and I figured I would have been called up soon, and I wanted to be able to get in and select the field I wanted to get into, so that's why I enlisted.
Okay, and you picked the Army.
I picked the Army.
Why did you pick the Army?
Basically because it's the first place I went to. You know, I checked and they had the field, and I wanted to get into the finance field, so. And so I, you know, went to the enlistment office and talked it over with the recruiter and decided to join the Army.
Okay.
And
when did you go in?
I went in, you want the exact date?
Well, you can give us if you know.
August 22nd, 1962.
Okay. Where did you go for basic?
Down at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was basic training and advanced training down there until, well, for 4 months. Then in January of '63, I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison for personal administration school. And then I was transferred down to Fort Bliss, Texas. And I spent 16 months down in Fort Bliss, Texas. And in fact, I was home on leave to get married. My wife was going to come back down to Fort Bliss, Texas with me, since I thought that I'd be spending the rest of my time there, since I'd already been there 16 months. And 3 days before the wedding, I got a long-distance call from my section chief down in Fort Bliss, Texas, saying I was on orders for Vietnam. So that kind of messed up our plans for the year. But
Now, what were you doing at Fort Bliss? Were you like a company clerk? Or?
I was worked in the personal office. I was a payroll clerk. I handled payroll records.
Okay.
And as I said, we had planned, you know, to get married, and my wife was going to come back down to Texas with me and spend my remaining term there, which I figured after 16 months, but apparently Uncle Sam had some different plans, and it was apparently some computer picked out our class from when we were at Fort Benjamin Harrison or something, because after a while over in Vietnam, when I was over there was like 3 or 4 other guys that came through and that were in my class.
Now, did your wedding still go on as scheduled?
Yeah, we got married. In fact, it was May 9th, 1964, and by the end of May, I was on my way to Vietnam.
How did you go over to Vietnam?
Well, we flew over on a chartered airline, you know, and flew back too, home when we came back. But you know, we left from Fort Ord, I believe, north is. And we flew the northern route. We flew up Alaska and then over, landed Japan, down to the Philippines, Clark Air Force Base, and then landed at Son Nhut Airbase, which is the big air base on the side of Saigon. Well, now it's called Ho Chi Minh City, but at the time it was Saigon. And this other individual and I, who was also went through administration school at Fort Benjamin Harrison with me. Him and I were both transferred down to Fort Bliss. So we were both, you know, caught up on these orders for Vietnam.
Now, when did you arrive in Vietnam?
Let's see now, we arrived, I think it was around, I would say around the 14th of June of '64.
What was your first impression when you got off the plane?
Well, when you got off the first impression was when we got off the plane and got on the bus to take us over to the headquarters there to be processed in, and I sat on the bus and I noticed, you know, all the windows of the bus were open, but they were all enclosed with like wire or chicken. And I asked the driver, I said, how come all the windows are? He says, well, that's so nobody can throw a hand grenade through the window when you know, if we're traveling along the road. And I said, you know, that puts a little different perspective on things. But actually, it turned out except for, you know, our living conditions weren't the greatest out at Son Nhut Airbase. The year was relatively, you know, to me, it's, every time you see a documentary now about Vietnam, all you see is like soldiers roaming through the jungle or walking through rice paddies, and that, well, it wasn't like that when I was there. I mean, I was in an administrative outfit naturally, and I'm sure there were outfits that, you know, infantry out that were out in the jungles and that, but I felt very fortunate that I never had experienced that, because I remember when I first came on orders and heard about going to Vietnam, and I used to jokingly tell my wife, well, future wife, and I can picture myself crawling through rice paddies with a typewriter strapped to my back. We had, well, when we first, our office, that was intense, but they were in the process of building a permanent type building, which we moved into, and we worked 5.5 days a week. And you know, we worked Saturday morning. We were off Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons, and all day Sunday. You know, we had free time, and so we spent a lot of time going into Saigon.
Did you have the option of living off post?
No, we didn't. Although there were a lot of dependents over there at the time. You know, military personnel that the families lived, you know, in town. They had like, you know, villas or something like that.
Yeah.
Were you ever given that option?
No, not like officers and
No, these were
higher
officers,
ranking enlisted
yeah.
personnel. They had their quarters off base.
Do you think if you had that option, you would have wanted your wife living there?
I don't know. Never thought about it, but
just
never
curious.
But in fact, there was a lot of civilian personnel over there too. In fact, there's one buddy of mine who worked in the office. His girlfriend was over there and her family, because her father worked for a big construction outfit. He was a contractor, and they were, I'm not quite sure what they did over there, what they were involved in, but they lived off base, you know, and they had their own nice little villa-like, and they had Vietnamese servants and that. So that was actually nice for us, because we used to get to go there, you know, with him, and it was like being at home almost, you know. But it was a different experience.
Were you ever under rocket or mortar attack?
No, we never were directly, but it was funny. Most nights, you know, you could lay in your bunk and you look out and you could see in the distance, you could see like tracer shells and like explosions, and hear like mortars and cannons go. But it was always out there, like in the boondocks. It was never that close to us at that time. But you know, when, you know, years later, when you see some of these stories, how close they really were to the outskirts of Saigon, and that it was, in fact, there was in downtown Saigon, there was a Hertz car agency there, and we could rent cars. You had to have a Vietnamese driver, but you could go rent a car and drive around the countryside, and we did that several times. Now, they used to say that once outside the city limits, that was VC territory, but I don't know, maybe we were, you know, young and carefree or something. It didn't really bother us. We used to, I can remember driving through these little Vietnamese villages and outdoor markets where, you know, people come and they'd have meat or whatever they had hanging up, and a peasant would come along to buy something. They would take it off, and they'd have to scrape all the bugs off before they wrapped it up and gave the person. And you know, it was a really different way of life over there. You couldn't believe some of the stuff there.
Now, did you carry a weapon at all when you went off like this?
No, not when we were off duty. If you traveled in country, you had to have a weapon with you. We were all issued M14s. Never really, only fired them once. We went to a firing range once, you know, but that's the only time. And
no, did you wear uniform or civilian clothes at all?
we more off duty, mostly when we went in town, we always wore civilian clothes. And,
No, did you eat much of the local food at all? Or?
Not really. I wasn't too, but there was restaurants we used to go to in town, and they served. Used to Chateaubriand steak dinner. I mean, it was probably water buffalo meat, you know, but you always made sure you ordered it well cooked, because you didn't know what kind of diseases they had around the animals and that. But and we ate and on the base there was we had our own EM club, and they had like a little snack bar there. Or in fact, we used to go over to the Air Force compound a lot, because they had much nicer facilities over there. And every Sunday in town there was an enlisted man's club, and I can't remember the name of the hotel now, but like on the 5th floor, and they had like, you could go there for $5, and they would cook steaks outside on the balcony, and they had like a, you know, big buffet type luncheon in there. And so almost every Sunday we used to go to that. But some of the local food, I wasn't that brave. Actually, the smell of it used to gag me. Some of it they used to have what they call Nuke, the sauce they used to put on everything, and it was not very appetizing to me. And as I say, I was stationed there right at Son Nhut Airbase. It was called, the Army is famous for acronyms, USA, that's the U.S. Army Support Command, Vietnam. But there was a lot of military personnel that lived right in downtown Saigon. They lived right in hotels down there, nice air-conditioned rooms, and they were with MACV, they called it, Military Assistant Command Vietnam. And there were a lot of Navy personnel in town.
Now, on base, what were your living quarters like?
It was like
were you in a tent or?
No, we had a permanent structure. We used to call them hooches, but it was, you know.
How many guys?
I'm trying to think. We had probably 40, 50.
Oh, okay.
You know, and we had house girls that took care, and we used to have a Papa-san, an elderly gentleman, used to come in every day, and he'd shine your boots up, and had a houseboy would, you know, clean up and straighten up and that. So we used to, each month we used to pay into a fund, you know, and that was paid over to these. And we had laundry people come in that took your laundry and did it and brought it back the next week. So, and in our compound, as I said, we had all the administrative offices there. And we had, there was like a barber shop there was tailor shops there, and you know, it was quite a big place, airbase, Son Nhut, you know. There was little like these kind of golf cart type things where you sat, it was called lembrettas, and you used to catch those and try to ride around the base on those. And we had a nice big swimming pool there on base, and you know, so.
Now, did you ever, when you were on the base, did you wear a flak jacket or helmet at
No.
all, or you didn't wear
No.
any of those things on the
No,
base?
in fact, you know, every once in a while, they call an alert, you know, and we have to get out, you know, because there were sandbag bunkers on both sides of our barrack building, and we'd have to get out, you know, in there and with our rifles and steel pot on and that, and nothing ever came of it. It was just but the funny part was, it was the Air Force or one of the was next door to ours, but they were never put on alert. You know, we'd be on alert, and we'd be in these sandbag bunkers, and they'd be partying over there. You could hear music going on and all this, and we're supposed to be on alert. And they were the most military type troops I've seen in the Air Force. I mean, they had, you know, you'd see guys walking around with dress pants and work clothes, you know, the jacket on, and walking around in, you know, flip-flops. I mean, that's another thing that gets me now around. I mean, you see so many people around here walking around flip-flops, and that's all you saw over there with the civilian population. You know, they never wore shoes or socks.
Now, did you wear the stateside type fatigues, or did you have jungle fatigues
No, just regular fatigues we had.
that you wore stateside?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we didn't have any jungle. Now, as I said, this was really before the big buildup
Right.
began. In fact, we were over there when the big build, you know, when we first got there, our office personnel, we used to process all new Army personnel into the country. They used to come through and come, well, it's like March of '65 when they sent in the first combat troops and that. They had to send in a whole new administrative outfit and set them up on base because we couldn't handle, you know, the workload just got too much for us. I don't know how it was after I left, but we were overwhelmed. And I remember they brought in, they cleared out there was this one area where they had a big soccer field and that, and they cleared that all out, and they erected like a tent city there to handle all the new administrative personnel coming in.
Now, was the base very noisy with all the planes coming in and out, or did you get used to that?
Oh yeah, well there was constantly helicopters flying overhead, you know, and as I said, military, and a lot of civilian or aircraft in the landing, you know, because, but it's funny, when planes took off from there though, they took off at a sharp angle like that because they said that, well, right at the end of the runway, they used to shoot at the planes taking off, you know, so that was one unique feature there but other than, as I said, I was very fortunate, we never got involved in any kind of, you know, fighting or anything like that. There was times where they attacked other bases and that around Saigon when we were put on alert, but they never, as I said, thank God they never hit us, because I mean, I don't think we were all administrative personnel. We weren't schooled in combat and stuff like that. We wouldn't have had much of a chance. In fact, the one night, coming back from town, from Saigon, and it was maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, but they called an alert because the VC had attacked Son Airbase, which was about, maybe like the distance from Buffalo, Niagara Falls, you know, was a, and they had, you know, sneak mortar attack, and so they put us on alert, and I can still remember that we're all lined up out in the open area between the offices and that, and, you know, we've got our rifles with us. Of course, we don't have any ammo, and it's all locked up in the one, and all these officers are running around, they couldn't, the first sergeant had the key for the ammo thing, and they couldn't locate him. I don't know if he was shacked up in town or where the heck he was, but for about you know, we were standing out there for a couple hours, and all these big Whig officers are running around. What are we going to do with that? I mean, nobody had to, well, why don't we break down the door and get the ammo? Oh, no, we can't do that. And after a couple hours, you know, the alert was over and nothing happened, but I mean, so it was kind of ridiculous. We're standing out there, you know, it's...
When you went on some of these trips through exploring the countryside, what were some of the things you went to see?
Just basically like driving out in the country. We didn't have any predetermined destination or anything like that. But as I said, I can remember driving down these, you know, one-lane roads and that into these little villages, and in one instance, I remember we had to cross a stream or something like that, and the driver made us, well, we had to get out of the car and walk across this bridge because he was afraid there may be too much weight in the car and the whole car would collapse the bridge. But, you know, and seeing, you know, all these Vietnamese peasants and that, and just looking at us and wondering what's going on. Of course, they didn't speak English, and we didn't speak Vietnamese, so.
But you felt at ease whenever
But
you...
we didn't really feel, you know, it was a threatening situation or anything like that. Now, maybe we were just lucky because I know of one instance I recall that it was over a group of 3 or 4 J. They went out, they took 3 days leave and they went on a fishing trip. They never came back. They found them, all 4 of them were, you know, I guess the VC guy executed them, you know. And in fact, I remember I was an honor guard at one of the funerals there, and William Westmoreland was there. And he was an impressive looking figure with all the stars around his collar and that. And I remember, you know, the steel coffins that they shipped back, and I remember saying, we carried it up into the chapel, and he said, remember, don't tip it, and he said, because we're afraid the embalming fluid would leak out or something like that, because they, you know, shipped the body back to the States. We saw a few, you know, body bags and that, not like it was in later years, you know, because every once in a while, as I said, this friend of mine that was down in Fort Bliss, Texas with me, he was assigned to a different company over in Vietnam on Son Nhut, and to get, it was about a 15-20 minute walk to get to where his compound was, and every once in a while you'd walk along the road and you'd see like body bags sitting outside one building. Maybe it was a temporary morgue or something, but it was the South Vietnamese though, because they were always around the building. And when we got in, a lot of routine was, you know, we'd get off at duty at night, go eat chow, come change, go out. As I said, we had a basketball court, so we played basketball for a couple hours, come back, get cleaned up, and go into town. You know, this was mainly to kill time. And
What were some of the things you did in town?
oh, visited a lot of bars. In fact, the main street there that was, I would say, comparable to what Chippewa Street is now in Buffalo, where it was Tudo Street, and that was the main drag. So you go into, you know, one bar and go in, or, you know, visit, or once in a while I would stop in the USO Center there, and most of the time when we went into town, that was it. And it was a different, as I said, the culture difference. I remember the first time stopping and went into one of the, local bars, and, they all these bar girls there, and they always wanted you to, hey, gee, you buy me a drink? What they call Saigon tea. Actually, all it was for them was like colored water, water with food coloring in, and, that's how they made their money, buying it. I don't remember what the cost was, but in Vietnamese money compared to American, it was pennies to us, but the first time we went into one of the restrooms, there was no separate men's room, ladies' rooms over there, it was all unisex, and you went into stand at the urinal to take a leak, and all of a sudden a bar girl comes strolling in and sits down on the stall and starts carrying on a conversation with you. That was a little bit of a culture shock at first, but after a while, it was just commonplace. You thought nothing of it, and you'd, in fact, a lot of times, like if you either take a cab into town, or if the driver had to relieve something, he'd just pull off to the side of the road and go over behind a bush, and men and women both, they did it. Thought nothing of it. It was, and let's see, the Tansa was about same day if it were like from Buffalo Airport to downtown Buffalo. So it took, if you caught a cab, it took maybe a half hour to get in. And that was another thing. The cabs were like these little blue and white French Renault, like something similar to a Volkswagen Beetle. And that, but we used to talk about these the cab drivers that they were all ex-kamikaze pilots, because the way they drove it, they never, especially at night, they never had their headlights on. All they had was like those little parking lights on the side. That's how they drove, and they never put the brakes on. All they would do was beep the horn and go. We really had some white knuckle rides. The way these guys used to fly through, and just like you see in the movies where people would be jumping off the wall, and that's the way it was. They'd beat their horn, and people would jump out of the way, and it was a crazy thing.
Now, how long were you there?
I was there, just under a year. I left around first week in June of '65. Just under a year. And some of the other experiences, as I said, we never really got involved in any type of combat there, but it seemed that almost once every couple of weeks we were restricted to the air base because there was some kind of political demonstration going on in town, or the students were having an uprising or something. So another thing, the government was very unsteady there. One of the jokes was we used to say that they had a coup of the month club in the Vietnamese government, because it seemed there was always, every month there was somebody new trying to take over the government. And I know a couple instances, whether any of this ever made it back into the States or anything, that some army general was trying to take over the government next stage. And on Thompson, right next to our compound, fenced off, was where the Vietnamese Air Force was located. And he was trying to get control of the Air Force, but luckily they had like 6 planes, I think, fighter, these prop jobs. I can't remember what type it was, but Sky Raiders they were called or something. But our compound, we were completely surrounded with Vietnamese Army troops. There was tanks there and all these standing around. And as I said, the planes got up in the air and they were making like practice strafing runs right down over our barracks and that. back and forth, and we were all out there, we thought it was a big joke, we were taking pictures and, you know, not making much of it. And it could have turned into a potentially really disastrous situation, but again, we didn't make much of it. And whether any of that ever made the news back in the States, I have no idea, you know, how they used to.
Did you keep in contact with your wife by letters?
Oh yes, used to write every day.
Every day.
In fact, a couple of times we could go into the USO and you know, we made, you know, tapes, you know, audio tapes where I could play it back and that, but it got to me, I just couldn't, you know, listen to it. After a while, I said, let's just write letters, because, you know, it really, after, you know, being a, you know, well, we just, you know, we had like, I don't know, before we got married, 16 times we were together or something, because we just started going out before I went into service, and when I came home on leave, I was home on leave like, it's like December of '62 for Christmas, then in May of '63, my cousin got married. September of '63, my younger brother got married. I was home for that, and I didn't come home again until May of '64 for the wedding, and then we were apart again for another year or so.
Did you ever get to, excuse me, see any USO shows?
Oh yeah, I saw the Bob Hope show, his first show he did over there in Saigon. I was at. In fact, I got a lot of this on movies at home. I've got color movies. Of course, at the time, it's not like the VCRs now.
Right.
But, there was no sound of that. You didn't have. But you know, we saw the first Bob Hope show he did at Son Nhut, you know, and in fact, it was. When was it? 2 days. It was Christmas Day of '64 that he did the show. He came in 2 days before, and they had targeted his group. They were Bob Hope, his entourage, and that they were supposed to stay at the Brinks Hotel in downtown Saigon. It was a bachelor officer quarters, and the VC blew it up and they were, luckily his troop was delayed a half hour, so else they could have, you know, they would have been in the middle of it. And one thing I remember in regard to that, I was on what they call CQ duty the Christmas Eve day, and that afternoon I got a call from the officer of the day, and he says, I had to organize a detail that had to go out. They had to go out and into this Vietnamese cemetery and look. There are apparently one of the U.S. personnel that was killed in this bombing of the hotel was buried by mistake in this Vietnamese cemetery, and they had to go out. I had to get a detail and go out, and these guys had to go out and dig up the body and that, you know. And I remember this was Christmas Eve afternoon, so you know nobody was working in that, and I just had to go around and send my runner out. Who's ever left in the barracks, I had to pick. You know, that wasn't too pleasant idea. Now, some of the guys that came back from the detail said they never were able to recover the body, but that was kind of especially being the time of year it was, and that was kind of, but yeah, the Bob Hope, that was one of the highlights of seeing his show. I mean, it was amazing. And as I said, I took care of payroll records, and I had like 4 or 5 different companies. There was an NP company, I took care of their records. There was a couple units. Of course, I said the Army is famous for acronyms. I had one outfit I took care of. It was SMIAT, S-M-I-A-T. That was Special Military Intelligence Activities Team. Now, these were all the personnel that had top secret clearances. They always walked around in civilian clothes. They were never in uniform. And I have no idea what they did. I prepared their payroll records. And there was another outfit called Active, A-C-T-I-V. It was Army Concept Team in Vietnam. And again, these were guys that came in. They were all officers, probably captains up through colonels. They also wore civilian clothes all the time, and they lived off base too. They had their own little compound there where they stayed. In fact, that was one of the spots where places we had guard duty at, you know, a couple of these different locations. And I remember one of the guys that came, they always a temporary duty. They were there 4 or 5 months. And I remember one of the guys that came in, his MOS guy, he was a deep sea diver. And I thought, what the heck, what a deep sea diver? But I kind of put two and two together later on when I heard about when they constructed that big naval base at Cameron Bay, was it, or something? I figured that's where he was involved in, you know, this. I'm trying to think of other than that.
When did you end up leaving Vietnam?
So I think it was around the 4th of June of '65.
Now, were you discharged almost as soon as you got back?
Yeah, that was one of the benefits. If you came back to the States with less than 3 months left to go in your enlistment, you were discharged then. So actually, by enlisting, I actually only spent an extra 10 months in the service because I got that early out, and it turned out to be a benefit to me, you know, later on, because I went back to school under the GI Bill. And
Did you return in your uniform, or did you wear a civilian?
No,
The anti-war movement hadn't started just yet when you...
No, not really.
Yeah.
No, we came back to the States by chartered aircraft
Right.
too, flew back, and then came back, I think it was on a Friday we landed, and then Monday I had to go to the Oakland Air Base, you know, and got my discharge papers and that. So my wife flew out, and we spent a week out there with this friend of mine with his family. He lived in San Rafael, which is across the bay from San Francisco.
No, you did say you made use of the GI Bill.
Yeah, I went back to school afterwards and got my degree. I never got the opportunity to go to college right after high school because my father took ill and that, and he had his own business. He had a grocery store, and we had to close that up. And so I still had a younger brother in school, so, you know, I had to help out at home, so. And that's one of the things when I went in the service, I figured I was going to take advantage of the GI Bill after I got out.
Did you stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
I used to contact this guy, his name was Maury. He lived in Hayward, California, which is a suburb of Oakland. And we used to write back and forth and send cards and that, but back in, I lost contact because one of my nephews got married out in California, and we were going out for the wedding, so I tried to get in touch with him there, and the phone number I had, and I called, and somebody answered the phone, and he says, no, there's nobody here by that name. I've never heard of him, he says, and I tried and traced and that, but I couldn't find I don't know whatever happened to him.
Mhm.
In fact, there was, used to get some Christmas cards to this house girl we had over in Vietnam.
Mhm.
And she used to send a Christmas card, and after a while that stopped too. I don't know whether, after the North and East took over and that, I don't know if she got caught up or what. And one thing I did, well, this was several years ago, there was an article in this a couple years ago, but they had a thing in here called, writing about dust off about these helicopter medevacs, and they were writing, and on the back how they talked about how the term originated and where it came. They wrote about this Major Kelly. Well, that's another one of the outfits I took care of. I took care of his pay records. I remember that. In fact, he was killed about 2 weeks after I had to make up his final pay voucher. I remember that, because you make it up until the day the person dies. That was just an interesting sideline. I just came across it.
Yeah.
30-some years later. And
Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
yeah, I belong to the American Legion and that, but I'm not real active. I joined, the Vietnam Veterans Association. I went to a couple of their meetings, but I don't know. To me, I kind of felt out of place because all these guys were combat veterans and that, and I really couldn't share any experience with them because they're talking about being out in the jungles, and here I'm talking about we're having parties down, In fact, as I said, whenever somebody went back to the States, was going back to the States, we used to throw a party for them, and we used to have like champagne parties because we could buy the champagne so cheap at the PX, and we had some wild times there. We had 50, 60, 70 bottles of champagne that we'd be going through it, and just a big bunch of guys, and living it up. But then you see, these later documentaries and watching them about these guys are out in the jungle, and I was very fortunate.
Now, is that a picture of you?
I was just gonna say, yeah, this was the day before I left Vietnam.
If you hold it up in front of you like this, Wayne can focus in on it.
I don't know if you.
Yeah, you can see it.
So you were a Spec 5?
Yeah.
And this is you leaving just before you left?
Yeah, I was receiving the Army Commendation Medal. But if you notice my face, my forehead is kind of different, because the week before I left, I had no duty, so I was spending all my time, at the.
You can put it down.
In fact, there was outside of Saigon, there was another former villain that the Navy, which the Navy ran, we went to learn how to water ski there.
Yeah.
We used to go water skiing in the Saigon River. The Navy provided the boats and the drivers, and we paid so much. And so my last week there, I spent a lot of time there because I had nothing to do, and I got too much sun. And my lips were all swollen up, and my head was, peeling and that. But
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
well, I had a positive effect as far as, learning discipline and stuff like that. But I realized that the service wasn't, really, I didn't go for a lot of this little stuff, it used to drive me crazy, inspections and stuff like that. Especially what used to get me so upset in Vietnam is every morning, we used to have to go on police call, you know, pick up cigarette butts, and it used to aggravate me because I didn't smoke. I says, why should I have to go around pick up somebody else's cigarette butts? I didn't throw them there. It was just, it used to drive me nuts. And, yeah, I may, I don't know if they ever want to keep artifacts. This is just a book that we bought. It says the funnier side of Vietnam, and it's got a lot of it's just like a joke book. You go in different, you know, but
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
okay. The currency was called a piastre, so you could like get 200 piastres for $1, American dollar. So you could exchange maybe $100 in American money, and you'd have this big wad of bill. It was like having Monopoly money because it was all different colors, you know, kind of like Canadian currency. And geez, you know, you'd give some person 100 piastre tip. I mean, to them it was great, but you know, it was maybe equivalent to 15 cents to us or something like that. It was just like having a big pile of Monopoly money.
Now, did you have the MPC over there, the military payment certificates, or you just used the piastres?
Well, we got paid in American currency.
Oh,
Yeah,
the regular greenbacks, you mean?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got paid at regular greenbacks.
Oh,
We
okay.
didn't agree. And you could go, actually, the official exchange rate was maybe 65 piastres to $1, but nobody did it the official way because you could go to any shop or these little tailor shops or downtown or at the bar, and they, you know, exchange it and get 200 piastres to $1. And they had, as I said, I had some couple nice suits made over there. You know, you'd had tailors and shirts and stuff like that. They were, you know, really reasonable. And of course, I said I got a lot of. I've got movies too, like riding into Saigon, how it is, and passing all these little towns and villages, and you know, people. It's like a couple pieces of tins stuck together, and that was their home. And
Think you, we've had some veterans that have gone back. Think you'd ever want to go back?
yeah, I think I would. And another thing, there was in Saigon, there was a big Olympic-sized swimming pool that just military or U.S. personnel could use. Beautiful, and they had, you know, a lot of, you know, the dependents and that used to go there, and kids, and you know, and again, they had like a snack bar there, and it was a huge pool. And in fact, they must at one time use it for diving events, because at the one end they had this huge diving. It was like 24 feet deep at the one end. This pool. So it was an interesting year, to tell you the truth.